We're going to open up this committee, and first item of business is any requests for bill introductions. Seeing none, we'll move on to the second item of the bill. So the second item of bill, I planned on having some discussion on the HCR 5022. Do I have a motion? Oh, actually, we need to do a little brief on the bill first. Mike, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, this, what you heard the other day was a bill that basically provides that there would be a call for an Article 5 convention, and it would be for the exclusive item of setting term limits for members of the U.S. House and U.S. Senate.
Committee, any questions? Pretty fresh on all of our minds. We just talked about this yesterday. So, before I forget and go too far, I want to recognize Representative Brantley for being with us today. Welcome to committee. So, body, do I have a motion?
Chairman, I move to pass HCR 5022 out favorably.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Body, is there any discussion? Well, I have one first, actually. Mike has an amendment that he's going to pass out.
Sutton asked me to prepare an amendment. Basically, the bill as it was printed provided for 2/3 majority in the House and Senate to pass it, and there was a federal district court case that basically said that the Kansas Constitution is trumped by the U.S. Constitution, so this amendment would strike the 2/3 and add majority.
As they're passing that out, anybody have questions about that amendment?
Just for procedural reasons, our staff said that Sutton drafted the amendment, but Mr. Chair, it's your amendment. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Representative Sutton and I talked about it, discussed it, and asked him if he would go ahead and handle that side of it. So is there a second on that amendment? Representative McDonald. McNorton, sorry. E-I-E-I-O. I've only had one cup of coffee today, so let's be easy on me. Body, all favor in this amendment, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. No. Amendment passes. Any other discussion? Representative Osmond.
Yeah, if I can get this far enough down. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've been conflicted on Convention of States. In the past, I have voted for it and I've voted against it, depending on a number of different things. I do believe that, my feeling on term limits is basically that that term limits can be honestly solved by just having elections and having voters vote the people out that they don't wish to vote out. Also that by putting in term limits, the people most experienced in any building is going to be the lobbyists. Those are the ones that are going to control what happens at the legislative level. But regardless of that, I know that within Article 5, there's a constitutional mandate for a convention of states. And that was what the Founding Fathers wanted. They wanted, originally, every 10 to 20 years for us to have a convention. I'm in support of the First Amendment saying redress of government, and you should allow for Convention of States, should you so desire. I have no problem with that. So that's why I have voted for it in the past. I can't support this, though, and it has nothing to do related to the concurrent resolution 5022. It is what we passed last week, I believe, House Bill 2065. 2065 says it calls for an explanation of how delegates are chosen, which is just fine. It also allows for punishment should you get out of line. Getting out of line means voting on or discussing any unapproved amendment within the Convention of States. Just voting or discussing on a political matter can lead to up to 26 months in prison. That is a clear violation of the First Amendment. It is such an overwhelming governmental overreach that is going to apply to HCR 5022. It taints the whole process. I can't support it. And regardless of my feelings on the Convention of States, I'm going to have to vote no on HCR 5022. Thank you.
Any other discussion? I would like to kind of add to that. You kind of talked about two different bills there at one time there, two separate bills. But for those of people that were kind of on the fence about a general Convention of States, this bill is similar to that, except with the fact that it is a single topic. This right here is saying that we have one topic that we want to talk about. We don't want to cover anything else. This is a single topic convention dealing with term limits. I just want to make sure we're clear on the distinction there. Any more discussion? See none, do I have a motion? We have a motion, sorry. Wow. See, no more discussion. We'll take a vote on it. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign.
No.
Representative Poskins would like your no vote recorded?
Yes, please, Mr.
Okay.
Chair.
Anybody else like their vote recorded? Representative Sanders would like his yes vote recorded. Representative Swartzfigger would like his yes vote recorded. Seeing none, bill passes. Moving on, we're going to have a hearing on, we're going to open up HB 2501, and Mike will explain this one to us.
Mike Heim with the Revisor of Statutes Office. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, this bill would provide that a federal firearms licensee conducting business in Kansas has entered into a firearm hold agreement with a firearm owner shall be immune from civil liability for returning the firearm at the termination of the hold agreement. And the immunity would not apply for any action arising out of the hold agreement if it was a result of some unlawful conduct by the federal firearms licensee. Basically, if somebody wants to have a federal firearms licensee hold their weapon and they enter into an agreement, and it would, I would assume, have some type of duration as far as the agreement. I'll answer questions if anybody has any.
Committee, any questions for Mike? Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Did we hear this last year?
I don't recall that we did.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, no, we did not hear this one last year. The last year was a voluntary exclusion list is what that was. No more questions? Thank you, Mike. Oh, Representative McNorton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the bill we heard last year was similar to this, but it was more for mental health where they could voluntarily be taken off of the do not sell list, was that right?
No, that was incorrect. This is nowhere near the same type of
So
bill.
this, okay,
The bill that we heard, had a hearing on last year had to do with a voluntary self-exclusion list to prevent from buying firearms. This has nothing to do with an exclusion list or anything like that.
okay, thank you.
Body, any more questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mike. We're going to start off with some proponents, and first up, we have Sierra Wright. Welcome to committee.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Sierra Wright, and I have the honor of serving as the Vice Chair for the Kansas Law Enforcement Crisis Intervention Team. I am also the Community Prevention Manager for Johnson County Mental Health Center. CIT is a community partnership between law enforcement, mental health, and people with lived experience to improve responses for individuals experiencing a mental health crisis. Across Kansas, crisis intervention teams work to ensure that individuals experiencing behavioral health crises have access to timely, least restrictive, and effective options for safety and stabilization. The expansion of TAP directly advances that mission. Throughout my career, I have assessed hundreds of youth for suicide risk. I have also witnessed firsthand the profound trauma and loss experienced by families and communities when someone dies by suicide. These are losses that ripple outward, affecting parents, siblings, classmates, first responders, neighborhoods, and communities. As you are likely aware, mental health-related calls for service continue to rise within law enforcement. My colleagues and partners in law enforcement routinely share the toll of responding to devastating suicide calls and the urgent need for additional prevention resources. TAP is one of those resources. The CIT Council believes that TAP is a critical piece of suicide prevention that we can deploy here in Kansas because it meets people where they are during moments of crisis and creates time and space for safety and recovery. In 2022, my understanding of this issue became deeply personal. During my second pregnancy, I began experiencing severe depression, psychosis, and suicidal ideation. What should have been one of the most joyful times of my life was instead marked by overwhelming darkness and despair. Despite having access to an excellent care team and unwavering family support, I reached a level of hopelessness I never thought possible. And on May 13th, 2022, I awoke in an ICU hospital bed after a suicide attempt. Sharing this story is not easy. There is still pain and shame, but I am here today because recovery is possible. I am living proof that a temporary crisis does not have to result in a permanent loss. Every Kansan deserves the opportunity to live safe, healthy lives and to survive their darkest moments. In politics and public service, it can often feel like so much is out of our control, but this is something we can do. Passing and signing the TAP bill into law is a tangible, bipartisan opportunity to help save lives, to ensure families do not lose a mother, a father, a child, or a loved one when prevention was within reach. Every Kansan should have access to a safe, temporary option to store firearms outside of their home during a period of crisis. TAP gives us that option, and it gives people time, hope, and the chance to recover. Thank you for your time, for your service, and your consideration.
Committee, any questions for Sierra?
Yes.
Representative Luis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sierra, I was reading your testimony, and are you an LSCW, MSCW? What are your
I'm an LMSW.
Excuse me?
An LMSW, licensed master's level social worker.
How long have you had your certification?
I have had that for 13, almost 14 years.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? Not seeing any. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Keith Cass. Keith, welcome to committee.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members.
Turn your mic on when your light's on. No?
The red light's on.
Okay, look closer to the mic then.
Okay, I'll just talk louder.
The folks at home can't hear if it's not through the mic.
I'll just talk a little louder then. Thank you for having me. I'm a U.S. veteran. I'm also a member of the Greater Kansas City Veterans Coalition, which we are really working on trying to prevent veterans from dying by suicide. Some of the statistics you probably know already, in case you don't. In 2022, there were 131 suicides per day in the general population, and there were 17.6 veteran suicides each day. If you extrapolate that out, we lose a Spring Hill, Kansas every year to veteran suicide. I have a young lady that is part of my Bible small group who is a medic serving with the Marines right now, who tells me that the active duty suicide rate is actually higher than veteran suicide rates. This bill would allow a veteran, and have a veteran small group in our church, when veterans get together in what they feel is a family grouping, they're willing to share. And it's been more than once in the last 6 months that somebody has sent out a text to the group that said, I'm in a bad spot right now, I need help. And we as veterans will respond to that person. I'd say almost every veteran I know has weapons in their house. But not every veteran is able to say, hey, I can take your weapons and store them for you. This is a safe, easy way to store weapons to get them out of the house of somebody who is in a dark position. They can feel it coming on, especially with PTSD, with TBIs or concussions. They know it's coming on. They don't want to go there. They don't have an option. There's an awful lot of men and women who raised their right hand and said that they would defend the Constitution of the United States against every enemy, foreign and domestic. I consider this a domestic problem. We haven't taken care of our veterans the way we should have. They're suffering. This is an easy way to take firearms out of the house to prevent them from hurting themselves or potentially others. If you want a correlation, in 1996, President Bill Clinton signed a bill called the Good Samaritan Law that said for food companies, if you have food that you believe is good and you donate it, give it to anybody, especially those in need, and something happens, you're not held liable for it. To me, this is a parallel to it. It's a way to help people help themselves. Thank you.
Body, any questions? Representative Poskins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Keith, thank you so much for being here today. Until I joined this committee just a few weeks ago, I was ranking on veterans and military. So thank you for your service and thank you for helping our other veterans, particularly in these situations. I understand also that for veterans specifically, anniversaries can present trauma, and that, you know, in advance of an anniversary, they would be able to take advantage of this and probably be safer as they work through that. Would you agree?
I would agree. Anytime they're able to take it to a gun owner who's part of the program, they're going to safely store the weapons for them with a time frame for them to pull it back out again. When they come back in, they have to pass the background check in order to get their weapons back again.
Thank you so much.
Representative Haskins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to echo my colleagues. Thank you for your service, but more specifically, this is just a comment. In reading your testimony, you took the liberty to share something extremely personal, and even though that's your decision to do, I thank you for making that open to us, and it helps demonstrate the severity of the issue and supports your proponent testimony. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Body, any more questions? Seeing none, I would like to just kind of point out, I know that probably one of the biggest, I don't know, for the lack of a better word, helps with this bill, but it's not just about mental health, right? So this can also apply to an active duty member maybe getting deployed that would like to maybe not leave his guns in his apartment for 6 to 8 months. So they could actually have another avenue for something like that. So there's lots of different avenues and lots of different applications for this, but this is obviously one of the focus ones that we're on. But seeing no more questions, I appreciate your testimony. Thank you, Keith. Next up, we have Don Turley. Welcome to committee, Don.
Hello, there we go. Thank you for having me today, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Don Denton Turley, and I've worked in the firearms industry for about 15 years. I'm one of the customer front-facing people who would be there when people come into our store. As an FFL, if you're in the firearms business for any time at all, you're going to sell a firearm to somebody who's going to apply that as a final solution. You're going to be the person who sells a firearm that's used in a crime. You are, as a FFL front-facing person, I'm the last person that sizes up a person who walks in the door. I also spend a lot of time in the gun community with the gun owners, and they trust me. And so when one of these people is having a crisis, is having a moment, they know they can come to me because they trust me. They also know that in this program, I'm not going to go tarnishing their reputation. I'm not going to call the police. I'm not going to rat them out, as it were. They know that I can hold on to their stuff. They can go deal with their situation and trust that I'm going to be the one holding on to their stuff. As such, this bill is important because we need protection from civil liability. Their family, should something turn out wrong, should this go badly, I'm the one who's putting my neck on the line. And this protection would make it a lot easier for me to sleep at night and be able to say yes than having that. One thing I will notice that was brought up when they were talking about the bill, verbiage on the bill is firearms owner. So sometimes what happens is if a child or a family member is having a crisis, their father, their spouse might be the ones that bring the firearms in to have us hold it. They're the ones that will have to get them checked out. So they'll be the ones that have to do the background check on the firearms. But it's not always the person who is the initial owner of the firearm who brings the firearm in for a hold. So if somebody's having a crisis and they're in the hospital, their father, their mother, their spouse might be the ones that bring it in. So you may want to consider an amendment to be responsible party for the firearms instead of firearms owner, because it may not always be the actual firearms. Sometimes it might be under the recommendation of the police. As a matter of fact, we just had our first, at our shop at Up in Arms, Kansas in DeSoto, had our first customer, as it were, for this program for us. Their parents brought in the firearms under the recommendation of the police because the police didn't want to be responsible for them. So we're currently holding firearms for this family, and we don't charge for the service. We have a safe that's specifically set up. We're the ones that talk to the ATF to make sure that this was all above board, everything was being done correctly and properly. But for us as an FFL, we really do think about what are the potential liabilities for us for doing this public service for you guys. Because this literally doesn't cost you guys anything. The state doesn't cost them a penny. We're the ones that do all the paperwork, everything. So that's why this bill is simple for you guys. And also, this program is important because for me personally, I'm a survivor of a suicide attempt in my youth, and that is time and distance. That's all we're trying to give these people. If I can give them one more day to think about it, one more minute, that's worth a lot. And all we're asking is that you shield us, you protect us from potential harm from bad actors. Thank you very much.
Committee, any questions? Representative Mosley. Oh, I'm sorry. Representative Osman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your testimony. So we've touched on this in bits and pieces today, but I was hoping you might help me to better understand what is a firearm hold agreement and what are the range of reasons that one might enter into it?
A firearms hold agreement is you've come in and you're saying that you're legally letting me hold your firearm for you, and each contract has terms on it. For us, there's no time limit. It can be here for as long as you need it to. Fortunately for us, we're not overwhelmed by a lot of firearms. It's like we talked about in the program, it's like being a fireman. A fireman that never puts out a fire is a good thing. That is a very, very good thing. Your fireman should be bored, okay? And so what the agreement does is it says that they understand that when they come back, they will have to do a background check. They don't just come back and pick up the firearm, that they need to pass a background check before we'll hand it over to them. It also lays out in our agreement what are the possibilities. So if I hold a firearm for you, and let's say 6 months from now, you have come to the decision that you should not have a firearm around you, then you can trust me to dispose of that firearm. I can sell it for you, we can find somebody to transfer it to, but it'll all be done legally and above board, and you won't have to worry about your name being attached to this firearm anymore.
Body, any more questions? Representative Smoy.
Don, thank you for being here. If you enter into an agreement with someone and you're holding their firearms and they were to come in and want to purchase a firearm from you, you're not going to sell, correct?
That is something that I would discuss with them. As an FFL, I'm given discretion to not sell a firearm to somebody. In the same way, if you walked into my store, wanted to buy a firearm, and there were flags, not only red flags, but even yellow flags, where I personally don't feel comfortable selling you a firearm, then I personally am legally allowed to go, I don't feel safe selling you a firearm. And we've had situations, because the gun world is a tight community. We've had situations where our phone rang and it was a gun shop down the street and said, hey, just so you know, a person ABC dressed like this, they were acting a little sus, so you may keep an eye out for them. And we'd spot them coming in, yeah, the red flags, and we tell them we can't help them today. But that is a discretionary line that we have, and that saves lives, because just like a bartender sells drinks to people and things happen, as a firearms dealer, I don't want to live with that. I already have enough to live with. And so that discretion would stop me from doing that. Legally, there's nothing to stop me from doing that, but that's where good practices comes into play.
All right, thank you very much. And regarding your past attempt, I am so glad you're here.
Every day's a gift.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Representative McNorton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm assuming in your agreement with the person that brings their firearm into you, you have clauses in there to cover if it got stolen, you had a fire, anything that might happen to that?
But yeah, our insurance would cover the firearm in that situation,
okay.
yes. So that basically falls under our insurance.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Mosley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first, thank you for sharing your story. I'm a veteran, and I do have, like most of my friends that they've lost to completing suicide. My question for you, for instance, I am eventually going to be responsible for about 50 weapons. Are you able to take high volumes of weapons if that became a problem?
Our one time that we've had to do this, that we currently hold, is one person, 10 firearms.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, and if we have a lot of firearms, that's where we can lean on other TAP program people, like, hey, I can only keep 12 or 15 or 20 of these guns. Could you pitch in here and take 10? And the person who's distributing these firearms would then have to drive them around. But if with a tight-knit TAP program, the Armory Project, we have the other resources that we can lean on. Johnson County Mental Health has been really helpful with that. They come in, they talk to us. We have suicide prevention forms in every single box that we put in. That it's a big thing for us. Thank you.
Representative Lewis. Representative Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, thank you very much for your testimony. How long has this program, I mean, it's a totally voluntary program to the gun shops. Is it ran by this Armory Project people, or is it just, that's where the forms come from, that you fill out your agreements?
Yes, they give us a form that's kind of a boilerplate form that we use for that.
All right. I do have a question about, so it doesn't have to, somebody in a household can turn in somebody else's firearms. Is that how it's done, or is that legal? I'm a little.
Yes. So in the state of Kansas, we don't register firearms to people. Proof of ownership is upon the owner to keep a receipt to prove that they own that firearm. Now, if somebody comes in and says, my husband, son, if a family member brings in a firearm, the question's always, now they know that you're turning them in, right? That they're on board with this. Yes. If not, then there's discussion there. It's like, okay, so who sent you here? And we're trying to find out, well, can we talk to this person? And we try to sort it out that way 99.9% of the time, because I couldn't take your firearm and go turn it in somewhere saying that I have permission to have this firearm, because that's theft. It's like if you borrowed a car and took it and put it in a shop somewhere, you can't do that. What this program, you're signing that I have permission to turn this firearm in. So that's why then the person who's doing the dropping off is ultimately responsible for how that gun got there.
And if I may, and just to clarify, it might have been answered earlier, but what if the other person comes in to claim it? I mean, is that, it has to be the same person who turned it in?
Has to be the same person, yep.
Thank you.
Representative Wilcott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not familiar with the firearm hold program, but I am a firearm owner that enjoys hunting. It sounds like this is a program already in existence today.
It is.
And the bill that's being submitted isn't changing that process or system. It's just giving civil protection for the firearm, the FFL holder that is following protocol through the process.
Absolutely. All this bill is doing is giving us more support from underneath and above. It's keeping the program upright, shielding us from being destroyed, because like anything else, most things are one lawsuit away from being a dream. And so we'd rather it not be a dream. They fought really hard to make this a real thing. I believe it was Arkansas? Louisiana. Louisiana was where this project actually originally started. And it's been expanding out slowly, and we're trying to get more states involved. And with protections like this, more gun shops will be willing to accept responsibility and become part of the program.
Thank you.
Representative Corbett.
Thank you, Chairman. So when someone turns these guns into you, do you record serial numbers and values?
Oh, well, not values. So by law, when an FFL takes in a firearm, it has to go into what's called a bound book, an A&D book, acceptance and deposition. And in that book will be make, model, serial number, caliber, name and address of who's turning it in. That all gets recorded in the system.
So being a devil's advocate, and someone, whether they liked you or didn't, when you were maybe at work, they took all your guns and took them down there to you, and you come home and say, where's my guns? The actual owner, maybe the true owner, could not get his guns back. Is that correct?
So what would happen is they would then report them stolen, and the ATF and the police would come, because they'd know that we picked them up, and they would come down, and then it would be returned to the rightful owner. In which case, that's no different than if you'd had a car stolen, and somebody represented as being there sold it to somebody. As the rightful owner, your property would be returned to you. In that scenario, they can get their gun back, but somebody will be in trouble for stealing property at that point. A crime has been committed.
So one more what if. So what if the guy or person turned the guns into you, and for some reason, within a time frame, they passed away? They they could not recover their guns because they are
So
gone.
in that case, usually what happens if, I used to also work in the pawn business, and that would be a scenario that would happen. Oftentimes, we would contact the ATF and say, hey, this is the scenario. How do you want us to handle this? And they would tell us how to disposition that firearm out to the next responsible party. But it would be whoever it is that is legally determined that would get those firearms, we would then make them go through the background check and everything. It wouldn't be sealed off forever where nobody could ever get them. I didn't just get 10 free guns. We would work with the legal system to figure out who rightfully then would get those firearms.
And the thing that I'm concerned about is if they were turned into you and you got them, the party passed away, there may not be anybody in the family even though the guns were taken there. You know what I'm saying?
So, and that's is where, because we don't register firearms in the state of Kansas, there's no central database of ownership. As a firearms owner, it's responsible for you to keep track of your stuff and make it clear what would happen. It'd be no different than if you'd pawned the gun and you died or something happened to you and nobody knew that gun was there. Technically, there's not a set date in which it becomes abandoned property, but we would then try to reach out and figure out what are we supposed to do with this. And the first stop would be contacting law enforcement and the ATF and saying, hey, we're in this scenario. What are our legal options here for us with these firearms? Because I don't want other people's property. I don't want to have to sell property that who knows where the money's supposed to go to. But that would be a separate issue as to what this bill actually does for us. Because this bill protects us from civil liability, other parties stepping in and suing us for holding these firearms for somebody. That scenario is, I would say it's outside the scope of this bill. It's a very real scenario, it could happen, but this bill would not affect that one way or the other. It is important. I'm not diminishing the value of that question. That's a good question, and the laws in that scenario, it would be the same as if you had any other property that somebody else was holding and you passed away. It certainly would not end up on the street randomly. So whoever ended up with them would have to go through a background check. And there would be a paper trail about who got it.
Not seeing any more questions. Thank you for your testimony, Don.
Thank you very much.
Next up, we have Nathan Carter. Nathan, welcome to committee.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you for hearing this bill and giving us an opportunity to provide testimony today. My name is Nathan Carter. I'm the Community Relations Manager for Johnson County Mental Health Center. I'm here today to express the Mental Health Center's support for House Bill 2501, which would help us expand a critical piece of our organization's suicide prevention efforts that you've been hearing a little bit about today. Preliminary data for 2025 shows that firearms were involved in nearly 64% of the deaths by suicide in Johnson County, 61 out of 96 deaths by suicide. Across Kansas, the numbers are similar. Firearms are involved in 60% of all deaths by suicide in our state. And among veterans who die by suicide in Kansas, the percentage of deaths involving a firearm is 77%. Those numbers and the lives and loved ones behind them are why we started a suicide prevention program called the Secure and Protect Initiative, which is an intentional effort to reach out to firearm owners and firearm retailers in our community, providing them with training and resources to increase mental health awareness and promote responsible firearm storage. The latest part of that effort has been the program that you've heard a little bit about today, the Armory Project, which helps local firearm retailers provide voluntary out-of-home storage for individuals experiencing a mental health crisis. Too often, firearm owners don't seek help or appropriate resources during mental health struggles because they fear losing their firearms. Having temporary storage available through a trusted professional partner like a local gun shop is a critical resource for us in meeting firearm owners where they're at and creating life-saving time and distance from their firearms that they need to stay safe during a mental health crisis, connect to care, recover, and ultimately return to the store to retrieve their firearms. To date, we have 2 stores in Johnson County who've agreed to provide this storage through the Armory project. You've heard from Up in Arms DeSoto, who recently stored their first firearms through the Armory project program. Other stores have expressed interest, but have cited liability concerns as a barrier to their participation, and that's why we're here today in support of this bill. This bill provides a safe, responsible tool for firearm owners to use in their darkest, most vulnerable moments, and it invites local business owners in to be part of the solution without putting themselves or their livelihood at risk for lending a helping hand. Together, we can expand this storage option in communities all across Kansas, one that respects firearm owners and their rights while also saving lives. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today and for your consideration of this bill.
Committee, any questions? Not seeing any. Nathan, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Amy Campbell. No stranger to Fed and State over the years. Welcome back to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Amy Campbell. I'm here representing the Kansas Mental Health Coalition. My testimony looks like this, and I hope it's useful to you. I've just tried to provide some background resources for you. In May 2024, there was a survey of a nationally representative sample of U.S. adults that were gun owners that asked them, it basically sought to determine how many people would be interested in potentially storing a firearm with a retailer or storing a firearm with local law enforcement. And those statistics are there. 41.38% were willing to share with retailers, 34% were willing to store with law enforcement agencies. So there's been some background work that's done on this to try to look at what's the best way to provide this service to gun owners who might need the service of storing their weapon away from their home. So I, as a firearm owner with a teenage son, could take advantage of this opportunity to store my weapons outside of the home in a safe way. There was another study that talked about how as many as 25% of gun owners in Colorado and Washington State had stored a firearm outside of their home in the past 5 years. Now, why would that be? Would it be because maybe they hunt at a remote location somewhere else where they travel, and it's better to store their weapons there than to travel with them? Maybe it's because they have had a weather event, a flooding, storm damage, fire. Nobody wants to be storing their firearms in a storage facility, in a storage locker, if they can help it. That's not the most secure place for their valued property. This just creates an opportunity. It's voluntary for the retailer. It's voluntary for the firearm owner to participate if they want to. It has been seen in a study of 8 states as an opportunity that is popular with firearm owners because it is self-determined and is not imposed upon anyone. With that, Mr. Chairman, I would be happy to answer questions.
Committee, any questions for Amy? Not seeing any. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
Next up, I have Michelle Ponce, I think. Is that correct? Sorry, I apologize if that's incorrect. Welcome to committee.
Thank you. Chair Kessler and members of the committee, my name is Michelle Ponce. I am the Associate Director for the Association of Community Mental Health Centers of Kansas. We represent all 25 licensed community mental health centers across the state who operate as the safety net for Kansans with behavioral health needs. I'll keep my comments very brief this morning. We appreciate the opportunity to testify in support of House Bill 2501. And that is because the rate of death by suicide in Kansas is something that we track regularly, and it is of grave concern. According to statistics provided by KDHE, in 2024, 516 Kansans died by suicide. This makes suicide the second leading cause of death for ages 15 to 44, second only to unintentional deaths such as vehicle accidents. And the good news is that the overall incidence is down from a high of 590 in 2022. However, firearms do continue to be the #1 leading mechanism of death by suicide. We believe strongly that prevention is a key component to the behavioral health strategy for our state to reduce the incidence of death by suicide, and that includes the ability to develop proactive safety plans. House Bill 2501 is a common sense approach to prevention that empowers individuals to voluntarily take these safety measures to prevent injury or death by firearm. Thank you for the opportunity to provide these comments, and I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
Body, any questions? Representative Mosley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much for your testimony and the work that you do. When we talk about gun violence, we often talk about community violence, but like the fact that you're highlighting death by suicide using firearms to make that completion. Can you talk a little bit about the rural American crisis? Because I believe farmers in Kansas are men in rural communities. I think they I think that they have like 3 times the suicide rate than their any other career field counterpart, just because of the fact that we're having, they're losing their markets, they have high debts, they have all these different things. Can you talk about some of the how death by suicide is impacting rural America?
Yes, thank you for that question. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but the impact of death by suicide in the agricultural community is also something that we've watched very closely for a variety of factors, including those that you mentioned. Sometimes economic stability, the stress of potentially losing the family business that may have been in the family for generations. Also, there can be some isolation with that career path, with individuals not necessarily connected to healthcare. They may not have health insurance. They may have some stigma in terms of seeking mental health care. I know that the community mental health centers have tried to employ a number of ways for specific outreach to that community, and a number of ways of delivering services, such as telehealth. In fact, we have a mental health center in the northwestern part of Kansas that serves a great deal of counties with a lot of farmers and ranchers. And they shared with me one time that they were providing therapy services to a farmer while he sat in his tractor receiving the mental health services that he needed, so that the individual did not have to take time away from working or to come into town and find time to make that therapy appointment. So your point is well made, that deaths by suicide don't impact just one group or one community. It's really across the board, ages and occupations.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Not seeing any others. Thank you for your testimony today. Next up, we have Mariah Day. Mariah, welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Mariah Day with the National Shooting Sports Foundation. We're the Firearm Industries Trade Association. You have my written testimony in front of you, I believe, so I won't belabor the point. The other conferees have been very thorough in their explanations of the bill and how this impacts both individuals who may need these services, as well as the FFLs, of federally licensed firearm dealers, retailers in each of your districts, and how this bill would help them avoid potential liability, civil liability that could come upon them should an individual get their firearms back and then something terrible happen after that. I won't belabor the point. You have my testimony. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to stand for them at the appropriate time.
Body, any questions? Representative Corbett.
Good morning.
Good morning.
This is a good bill, but I think what it might need is it doesn't really cover the transaction agreement. Something like when the party brings the guns to the FFL dealer, you would think that that party would get a copy of make and model and serial number of weapons. And another pattern on that would be also have the ability to leave a second contact number in case of illness or death. Would you see anything wrong with that to this bill?
Yeah, I think, thank you for your question, Representative. I think, we'd be open to conversation about, any additions to the bill that could provide additional clarity in some of these areas. I think some of those ideas are absolutely beneficial to consider. I think a lot of this, comes down to the individual agreement between an FFL, that retailer, and the individual that they're dealing with. And, as a previous conferee said, there's kind of a boilerplate that a lot of FFLs have already been using. I think if you looked at some of those agreements, a lot of the verbiage in the agreement would provide for a lot of that, as well as kind of one of your earlier questions, Representative, related to the disposition of property that's either unclaimed or abandoned. Thankfully, state law already has provisions related to a lot of those type of situations, so there is a process in place, but I get your point, and I would agree that a little extra clarity could probably be had very easily with just a little tweak here or there. Thank you for your question.
Body, any more questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mariah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Next up, we have a couple people on WebEx. First up is David Morantz. David, are you with us?
Yes, Mr. Chair, can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay?
We can. Welcome
Okay.
to the committee.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair and staff, for allowing us to submit testimony last night. This came up on us and scrambled yesterday to learn about the bill. I'm sorry I can't be there in person. I wish I was. I could talk for hours with Mr. Turley and Mr. Day about legal issues surrounding firearms transactions. I'm testifying today on behalf of the Kansas Trial Lawyers Association. We're a statewide organization of attorneys representing victims of negligence, as well as workplace accident victims and consumers. I have quite a bit of history with firearms cases. I represented families who lost loved ones in the Jewish Community Center shootings in 2014 in Overland Park. Also a family who lost a loved one in the Heston shootings in 2016. I have a case on appeal right now out of Rice County concerning a firearm transaction that resulted in the death of a father. Those cases involve transactions from everybody from FFLs as big as Walmart down to a small gun and pawn shop, as well as a mid-sized operation. So I've seen a lot of firearms transactions cases, and I know what can happen when firearms end up in the wrong hands. I also know the importance of, because I've looked at a case involving suicide of somebody who recently purchased a firearm. I know the tragedies that can occur from these, as the proponents have testified to today. And that's why we submitted neutral testimony on this, because we agree with the intent of this bill and certainly are in favor of removing firearms from the hands of dangerous people. And it's not just dangerous folks who these agreements can apply to, as has been stated earlier. If someone's going to be out of town for a while and they're not comfortable leaving their firearm unattended, they can submit it to an FFL under one of these holds, and that's a laudable goal and a laudable agreement. We're concerned, though, with the possible unintended consequence of this bill, and that's how it might affect what are called negligent entrustment or negligent transfer cases. It has been longstanding Kansas law that, and I'm quoting here, that those in possession of firearms should exercise the highest standard of care in deterring the possession of those firearms by those who are at special risk to misuse the weapons. That's from an old Kansas Supreme Court case. It's based on prior law. It's also based on statutes, both federal and state, prohibiting the transfer of firearms to dangerous criminals. It's not just Kansas law, though, that cautions against allowing firearms to end up in dangerous hands. As Mr. Day could tell you, and Mr. Turley, The National Shooting Sports Foundation has long partnered with the ATF to provide training to FFLs and to retailers such as Mr. Day, or such as Mr. Turley, on spotting and stopping what are called straw purchases, as well as spotting and stopping potential transfers to folks who are dangerous, to folks who might be suicidal or who might intend to harm others. Those cases are tough. As I've said before, I've handled them and I've had to turn a lot of them down. They're very tough to prove, but they exist, and bad things can happen. The majority of firearms dealers and FFLs take that training from the NSSF seriously, and they take their role seriously because they recognize, as the ATF and the NSSF tells them, they are on the front lines of keeping firearms out of the hands of dangerous people. However, bad things can happen. And one of the things that can happen at the end of a firearms hold agreement is if the owner comes in and says, okay, I want my gun back, I'm going to go shoot up my wife, or I'm going to go shoot up my workplace. Now, that's an extreme example. But in those situations, as Mr. Turley, I think, said earlier, those would be red flags. Even if it's a yellow flag, FFLs are told, you don't give the gun back. They do have the discretion to not allow a sale, but the NSSF and the ATF say not only do you have the discretion, you have a duty in that situation to not allow a sale or a transfer in this case, because handing the gun back to the owner is considered to be a transfer. Again, those are extreme examples, but those situations can play out, whether it be red flags like that or yellow flags. So there needs to be a disincentive for FFLs to give guns back in those situations. Otherwise, tragedies can occur, such as the cases that I've handled or some of the cases that we've heard about today. Background checks in this play a critical role. The ATF Form 4473, which I'm sure Mr. Turley and Mr. Day could tell you about, those also play critical roles in these transactions. Any of those of you who have ever bought a gun, you've had to fill out one of those forms. You know that you have to answer a number of questions, and I suspect that at the end of a hold agreement, those same questions have to be answered in order to return the form to return the firearm to the owner. But as currently written, HB 2501 could basically wreck all those protections that ATF Form 4473 provides, because there would no longer be civil liability if an owner came back in and demonstrated that he or she was unfit to have that firearm and then went out and harmed somebody. Because under this bill, under one interpretation of it as currently written, the firearms dealer could get off scot-free and face no civil liability. So we are interested in working with the proponents on this bill, hopefully working with the revisor's office to craft some amendatory language. I suspect it would be to paragraph B1 and clarifying the notwithstanding any other provision of law language that would still recognize longstanding Kansas law on this that allows claims for negligent entrustment or negligent provision, and also complies with the goals of ATF regulations, as well as what the NSSF teaches on this topic. I'm sorry I can't be there in person. I have a commitment later this morning that I couldn't get out of. I could talk for hours with you all, with the proponents about some of these issues, and I'd be happy to meet with them further and try to work out some amendatory language. Again, thank you for accommodating my testimony. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Buddy, any questions? Not seeing any. David, thank you for your testimony. Next up, we have another WebEx. Melissa Osborne. Melissa, are you with us? Melissa is not with us. So we're going to move on. If she comes back on, let me know. Was there anybody else in the audience that was supposed to be down for oral presentation and hasn't? Yes, sir, come on up. State your name for the record, please, and welcome to committee.
My name is Ken Grommet. I'm the owner of Range 54 in Wichita, Kansas at 5725 East Kellogg. I'm here to talk about supporting the bill. My experience is what has brought me here today. I spent 4 years in the Marine Corps, 38 years in law enforcement. I've seen suicides of every manner, so on and so forth. I've had an employee that committed suicide. I had family members commit suicide, and we have been a part of not the Armory Project, but Hold My Gun since 2020. So we've been doing this for a while. Why I think it's necessary, I am the only FFL in the Wichita area that has an agreement to hold guns for the community if they so choose. Hold My Guns does not only hold guns for people in crisis, we hold guns for people that need to go to McConnell Air Force Base as a contractor and can't carry their firearms onto that facility. So we hold their guns in that situation. The way that temporary storage works is that, and this is an open letter from the ATF, is that we can have lockers within our facility where the gun owner provides a lock, they put the gun in the lock, when they're ready to pick it up, they come unlock the locker and they leave. There's no paperwork done. The other way you've heard about is the gun comes in, it goes into our bound book, the acquisition and disposition book. The acquisition and disposition book is the book where wherever I buy a firearm from or acquire the firearm from, it goes into the book. And when I dispose of it, that's who I dispose it to. Those records are often checked by the ATF and accessible to them. So again, those are the two ways that people can store with us. We do about 30 firearms a year for a variety of reasons. With Hold My Guns, we don't ask the question, you know, if there is a mental crisis or not, we really don't care. It's not up to us to make any judgment as to why somebody is turning their gun in. I think the people that have been in crisis with us in the past, it's been a family member that has turned it in and not the member themselves, which again is not a huge problem. I don't have much else. I mean, everybody else has covered it. We've talked about statistics. I have some, but you know, I will provide a copy to the committee of my testimony. But I will answer any questions that you guys might have related to the bill. I do support it. I think that what we need is more FFLs on board because I can't do them all. And I've been contacted from other parts of the state and just we can't help everybody. And you know, this law helps protect FFLs, and I think that's an opportunity for more people to get involved.
Thank you. That was going to be my question for you. If you'd make sure you submit your testimony to Cheryl and she'll get that distributed out.
You tell me how I do that, sir, and I'll be glad to.
She'll get with you before you leave.
Okay, thank you.
Body, any questions? Representative Smoy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ken, thank you for being here. Thank you for the service that you are providing through Range 54 and partnering with Hold My Guns. About how many, and I'm not asking for a specific, but a rough estimate, about how many people have you held guns for since implementing this?
We do about 30 a year, and we've been doing it since 2020, so you do the math.
Yeah. All right, that was my question. Thank you very much for being here.
Body, any more questions? Seeing none, thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
Body, I would like to point out we do have several written testimonies as proponents on this. We do have one written neutral in there, and I don't see any written oral for opposition. Was there somebody in the audience that was wanting to speak on that side? Not seeing any. Representative Howell.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just make a brief comment and just say I would just like to thank the conferees for sharing their personal stories today. And their testimonies, both written and oral, were very good, and I really valued and appreciated it. Thank you.
Not seeing any more questions, we're going to close the hearing on HB 2501. And body, that is actually, oh, I do have one more thing coming back up. I had a member of the audience that wanted to do a bill introduction, so we're going to ask for bill introductions one more time.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Kessler and members of the committee. I'm Jean Gowden, Director of Government Relations with Kansans for Life, and I would like to respectfully request the introduction of 26 RS 2770, and that title for that is the Pregnancy Center Autonomy and Rights of Expression Act.
Body, any questions? Seeing none, without objection, we'll accept that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Body, that is all we had today. Anybody have anything for the good of the committee? Not seeing any? We're adjourned.